All right. Welcome to everybody. It is 9 a.m. and we are going to go ahead and get started. I am Amy Ezel, and if I have not met some of you, I serve for the Conference Center for Communications. We have with us today James Chorlog, who is the senior pastor at Rogers First United Methodist Church. We also have Reverend Will Choate, who is the senior pastor at Argenta United Methodist Church. We have Jacob Turner, who is a colleague of mine and serves for the Center for Communication at the conference. He is the local church liaison, so probably everybody knows Jacob. And then we have Reverend Michelle Morris, who is the associate pastor at Conway First United Methodist Church. So everybody, welcome. We are going to be talking about virtual small groups and the ability, the gift of being able to use these small groups in a virtual way online to connect better or to educate throughout what started as through the pandemic, but is now we see it growing through connection. And we're going to talk about a little bit about, where some of these church leaders will be taking this this ministry in the future. So also we're going to talk about different platforms for you creating different small groups and what virtual platforms are out there, and some new ones that you might find very interesting and intriguing. So anyway, let's get started. I want to encourage everyone who is attending, please, thank you for your messages in the chat. Love them, always welcome that, but I don't see those as much as I see when you do a Q&A. So if you would place questions in the Q&A, and we want to treat this as a roundtable discussion, not necessarily like presentation. So please feel free to ask a question, and we will try our best to answer it. And so anyway, without further ado, I'm going to ask Reverend Morris if you will open us in prayer this morning.
Sure, let's pray. Lord, we call upon your Holy Spirit to be present in all of these places, to inspire us to share with one another how we might best make deep connections that can sustain us, that can help us grow, that can move us to be the disciples that you call us to be. So let this be an open space of sharing, a space where your creativity is present, and a space where we learn and grow from one another. We ask all these things in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So I'm sorry, I've got chat and attendees and Q&A all pulled up. So let me get to there we go. So I'm going to start in asking my pastor, the church, my personal church leader is Reverend Will Choate, and I've had the pleasure of taking part in small group ministry, virtual ministry at Argenta. And Will, I'm gonna open, by asking you what was your why? And where did you see a need? How did you feel this need for creating the virtual small group ministry that you have at Argenta?
Necessity was part of that.
Yeah.
I don't think that we would have ended. I don't think I would have done what we've done if it wasn't necessary. And frankly, in some ways, the preference, at least on my end, would for us to be live. And so maybe the necessity, when the necessity's gone, I may see it differently. but as often happens, some life-giving things have happened out of that, even with that being the starting point. And of course, we have like most churches have I don't know what you call them. I forget what the vision statements and mission statements and how to divide them all up. But something that beats inside of me has always been to create places for people to connect with God and one another, and, add wordsmith it all you want from there. But I thought, well, how are we going to do that? And that mission can still live out. And of course, doing that through small groups. So that's the why. I mean, for me, I think for some, you would look at it, and I trust they have, and people here saw the digital landscape as evangelistic opportunity. And I didn't quite feel called to that. I have felt called to such things in certain territories or mission fields or whatever word you want to fill in, but I didn't quite feel called to that in this case. It was definitely more pastoral for me. I felt called to who we already are. How can we sustain that? And so maybe instead of evangelistic, catechistic, is that the word? And so more about spiritual formation and fellowship with who we already were. So I didn't feel a sense of like, let's go evangelize the world through digital platforms. Though some probably haven't. I'm sure that trust the Spirit's moved and all that. But for our church and through my leadership, I've approached it pastorally. So that's the why, probably more than anything.
Gotcha. Thank you. Michelle, I would love to hear from you. What was the why for you and for the leadership team at First Conway?
So it's funny. I think Will and I are going to be a good balance on this panel, because it was evangelistic, not solely, but I did get to my appointment after the pandemic had already hit. So they had in many ways done the pastoral piece. They'd equipped the existing small groups to maintain connection and help them with that. So honestly, when I came in, it was a question of, okay, who are we picking up now with our online worship, and how are we going to reach those folks, and how are we going to start getting them connected? So it was very much, we did have the pastoral strategy, but we also thought about, okay, how can we integrate new people into this space? And one of the things that we did was have a Sunday school class that's kind of open and does different topics and is advertised every week in our online worship service. And so that makes that space open to anyone who wants to be part of it. And we periodically mention it in our announcements. We also there was another piece. We wanted to make sure people had a way to continue to grow in their discipleship. And so we did start new small groups around discipleship coaching. And we did that in tandem with a worship series that we did on discipleship, where everyone helped kind of got to understand their discipleship a little bit better. And we started new small groups around that. And some of those are continuing to meet. And they basically it's built very similarly to that Wesleyan small group accountability groups, where you met and said, how is it with your soul? Except they're regularly meeting and asking, how is it with your discipleship, right? What steps are you making in your discipleship? And so it was both pushing people to grow a little bit more in their faith. And by the way, I will mention that one of those groups that is meeting does have someone from Kentucky that joins. So we are regularly seeing people from other states who are now starting to integrate into our community because of that as well. So yeah,
great. Thank you.
Those are why. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's kind of talk a little tactically, and I would love to hear from Michelle and Will. How exactly have you built small groups, virtual small groups, that have been able to create connection? Tell me kind of what your you've shared your why, So tell me how it kind of got started, and where you began, and kind of maybe what are some things that you might be praying about or considering for the future.
Yeah, my instinct was to brief, and particularly in the beginnings of this, people were, while they had an appetite to be digital and on Zoom, they were doing it a ton. And so I didn't want to add to that. And so our groups are 30 minutes, and I hold to that pretty strong. And I host them. We had folks who had led groups for us, but that wasn't what this was. I want, again, in that pastoral mode, really an opportunity to get in the room with folks and see how you're doing, and let them see how each other were doing. And we had content, and I would send that out, but the content didn't ask much of folks. It was something they could do briefly, and part of that was from my own experience. We have a ton of folks in a life stage where they have young children, and I did too, and I do, and so I kind of had a sense that, hey, your virtual schooling, and the last thing you want to do is do adult virtual school, and so there was a sense where you didn't want too much. I didn't want to give folks too much content, whether that was at work or whether they're doing it with their kids. And so we do 30 minutes. We did weird times. I would go later than I would normally go with a group that was live. So we would meet at 8:30 to 9. We would do 4:30 to 5. Folks were working from home. So right before maybe they pick up kids, or after they put kids to bed, was some of my thinking. And then once we get there, there's kind of a mantra I have: don't be a chill host. And I'm not a chill host when I get there, and particularly, and I've noticed that is particularly needed in virtual worlds. So I'm guiding it very, because it feels like a big deal to hit your unmute button, like you have to say something really important, and so it's hard to have conversation in that unless somebody's not being a chill host. So it is, hey Amy, will you speak to, or hey Michelle, will you speak to, and so. Getting that agenda out early, sticking to that time, saying good night. If it takes 20 minutes, I'm like, all right, good night, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. And so those are some of the tactics or strategy, I guess, that I've used in hosting them.
Awesome, Michelle.
What we're working with now is starting to think in terms of hybrid spaces, and because there are different needs that people have in this reality. And so like right now we're doing a study on Revelation, and it is split. You can come in via Zoom, or you can watch on Facebook Live. And we're actually using Zoom webinar. I debated between using webinar or meeting, and I decided we could use webinar because if people wanted to be seen, I could always promote them up to the panel, right? And it controlled the bandwidth a little bit more. But what I found was I had a good group of folks that were just interested in like a lecture sort of approach to learning, and then a group of folks that wanted more interaction. Mm-hmm. So we broadcast the first part of that study on Facebook as a lecture. And like I said, we have some people that join us there, and then we also have people that are joined in on the webinar at the same time. So it's dual platform going at the same time, because we're streaming the Zoom on Facebook. And then when the lecture part cuts off, we cut off of Facebook Live, and then go solely into that more protected space where people can they're not being broadcast on out to anybody, right? It's now become a more intimate space where they can have the question and answer and the interaction piece. So that's what we're thinking, and we're moving to thinking in terms of hybrid from here on out. I've just trained our small group leaders in how to have once we're back face to face, to not abandon the Zoom option. So we're actually decking out our classrooms so that Zoom and face-to-face can happen at the same time. because we've picked up people from other places, because people are always going to have some challenges, like needing to go stay with a sick parent, but they want to stay connected to their small group, or maybe they're going through something like chemotherapy treatment, but being part of their small group is so important to their healing and their soul work. So we're actually prepping to be in both realities from here on out. And so we're always thinking in those dual terms now.
Gotcha. So Will and Michelle, this common element that I know that hasn't been touched on yet is that both of you, Michelle, I saw on Facebook where you just put a general post out there for whomever. Would you be interested in studying Revelations?
Mm-hmm.
And then Will, you went more with a targeted response in reaching out to church members to, say, I'm going to be doing this. Would you be interested? And maybe I got that backwards. Or would you be interested if I did this? So anyway, would y'all share a little bit about, how you, like at the very, very beginning, how this started? Did you ask, how did you know what the topic of conversation was going to be, what the connection point was going to be, what the layout, the outline was going to be? And Michelle, I know you talked about it's kind of classroom and a comfortable classroom, but Will's is more inverted, that he gives assignments beforehand and then we just discuss. So anyway, y'all talk a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, Audra, my wife and I have been trying to say to one another, let's make 3-week decisions. And so we whether we're going to take our kids back to school or whether we're in so everything, what new information do we have? Let's make a 3-week decision. And so really these groups, I had the same mentality. They've been 3 weeks. So we meet, we start, and there are 3 meetings and then they're over. And then I'll wait a couple of weeks and then I'll reach back out and I'll host a different one. So the content's always changing. One advantage of that is I have been, when the Black Lives Matter stuff, it's like, okay, let's do something on racism. And so that's our content. When Advent comes up, okay, we're going to do Advent. And so there's an evolving sense of content. And one of the things I want to do was not really to see as an opportunity to share some things that have been formative for me, kind of underneath the, people who have influenced me over the years, and to share some of that content, and to do that in a variety of ways. So, that might be a sermon, and let's listen to this sermon together. Or not my own, but somebody, or let's listen. This paper has inspired me, is in the underbelly of a lot of my thinking, and let me share that with you. But we've also done a poem, or a movie, or and so we just kind of evolving what the fun ways. We did a podcast. I think I did one that was called like a podcast, a poem, and a paper, and so whatever, and so. Asking people, it's 3 different things. They're brief. You can do that and you're, with some headphones or whatever. And so that in terms of content, that has, that's how I've approached it.
Yeah, we, one of the things that I think has been, really hard about this season is, pastors usually like to shape their world around the heartbeat of their people, right? And to be in many ways scattered from our people means a little bit like you feel like you're shooting in the dark. And so,
well, and you received a new appointment,
right? So I don't even know. People keep asking me, how's your congregation? I'm like, I've only met like 75 to 100 of them. So out of a 500, typically congregation. Yeah. So I don't know. And so yeah, one of the things that I did was do that Facebook reach, and I asked, would you be interested in this topic, and how would you like it delivered? So I asked both things, and that's how I got this sense that yeah, there was a lot of energy around a study around Revelation. There were a lot of responses to that. But also that it was pretty split between those that needed that kind of straight, just lecture style, and those that needed the more interactive style. So that's what caused me to build that kind of hybrid space. But the other thing is that we are trying to keep a group that is scattered from one another cohesive. And so we are, much of the small group energy that we're moving into, and was the case with the discipleship groups as well, is gearing around sermon series that or full church emphases. We're going to do another round in Lent. We're really excited about our Lenten series, and so we're offering spaces for new small groups to pop up around that, and for existing small groups like Sunday school classes to also work through that together. So it's trying to give this cohesion in a space that's very scattered, and helping our people feel more connected to one another as well. So yeah, we kind of use those dual strategies of the ask, right? You just have to kind of get out there and say, hey, what do you need? And then also just cast a big vision for everyone to step into.
Yeah. I want to share a little bit. Jeff Warwick sent that they are doing a small group, virtual small groups, and using discipleship bands. And Jeff, when I first read your question here, I thought you were talking about your band, that you had like a small group study for your worship band, and I was like, oh my goodness, how awesome. But no, I see now that that it is a field guide, and that is awesome. And so it includes everyone in the church, and I see also that you are going with less formal like Bible study, and creating a time for encouragement and accountability. That's awesome. So there you go right there, folks. That's a specific, if you are looking for a book, you might want to check that out. Reach out to Jeff Warwick about the book that they are studying. Can
I jump in? There was one other resource that I thought we are getting more intentional about using Amplify, which is a resource provided by the publishing house.
Yeah.
That puts videos out there and series out there, and we actually build our own curriculum. So our children's Sunday school releases videos every week for families to go in and do Sunday school curriculum together, and we send boxes home with them with all that they need for a month of Sunday school together as a family. And we use the Amplify platform to put any of the video material that we need out there, and to use currently existing video material. And that's helpful because people can log on to that. It's on, you can put it, there's an app on your phone. It's really, really easy. There is a cost to it. So be aware of that. But I just want to say that that's a resource that's really usable out there.
Jacob, will you put in the Q&A, will you give a link to Amplify? And what I find, so many times you're in these webinars or in a Zoom call and people say, oh, I put a link in the chat. And then you get off the call and you go, oh, what? Here's my tip of the day. If you'll go ahead and click on it, and it will open a tab for you, or if you don't want to get away from the screen, you can take a picture of it and go back to it. It just won't be an active link. So what I usually do is I just click on it so that when I finish with a webinar or a Zoom, I have all these open tabs that I can go back to. So anyway, just wanted to share that. So anyway, thank y'all for sharing that. That has been very helpful. Does anyone have any questions? Will is going to have to hop off here in just a minute. He has another obligation. Y'all all know what it's like. Does anyone have any questions specifically for Michelle or Will? I think we've had, what a great and diverse conversation on virtual small groups, from different ways to do it.
I see Judy's got a question about how to do hybrid Zoom. So if you don't mind, I'll hop in and tell her what we're doing.
Sure.
So Judy, basically what you need for hybrid Zoom is you need someone to bring their computer, someone to bring their phone. You need ideally you need
Wi-Fi. You have to have good
You have to have Wi-Fi. You have to have Wi-Fi, right? You need a computer, phone, Wi-Fi, a podcast mic, and a television screen, and an HDMI cord. And basically what we are doing is having a host come in, hook their computer into the television screen, and then hook up the podcast mic into their computer. The podcast mic does this kind of sound, and so we can set it in the middle of the room, and the sound is your big challenge when you're talking about a hybrid space, right? So you want one good mic, and those will run you about $100 if you go with a Yeti mic, for instance. That's what they'll cost. But anyway, so someone starts the meeting, allows people to come in on Zoom. You have the people that are face to face, and then the person with their phone comes in on Zoom and mutes because you don't want to get the kind of feedback problem there. Goes to mute and turns the phone to see the people in the room. So the people on Zoom can see the people in the room through the phone option. Everybody can see the speaker because the computer is aimed at the speaker, and the people in the room can see the people on Zoom. And then you have the sound option to hold that together. So you can still do things like share videos. When you share videos from the computer screen, it kicks onto the television, and then everybody's watching it. It's a fairly easy setup to do. There is again a little bit of expense to it, but it does make a space where you can have people join from both places. And we wanted to be able to do that as people are going to ease in. We've got some that are chomping at the bit to be back face to face, and some that are going to be still months out. And so we wanted to make space for them to maintain that connection and not lose that, or not have to say, okay, this is the point where we're going back face to face. Sorry, all of you that joined via Zoom, right? We wanted to make a space that allowed for both of those realities.
So. Judy, while she was sharing all of the different technical stuff, I wanted to go, and don't forget the flux capacitor. But I didn't, but that's kind of how I just go, oh, okay. So let me tell you, if you all have technical questions about how a hybrid Zoom can work, reach out to Michelle or reach out to Jacob Turner. They will be able to share with you how you do not need a flux capacitor, that it is doable, and they will be able to share with you how to do that. You know, I want to speak for our small group at Argenta, and I don't know. I mean, we have not been able to meet in person, and what is so fascinating with our group is that some of us have, well, I was new to the church anyway, and did not know any of these people when we started. And now we have this great friendship, and we have this ongoing discussion of, we can't wait to really meet each other. We can't wait to get together and have dinner and things like that. So I can say for a fact that the virtual small group experience has been such a positive for my life, and that I have new friends. I have new friends through Jesus, where I wouldn't have if we didn't have a leader that wanted to provide a deeper connection point. And so anyway, so I just highly suggest that everyone give this a try. Will and Michelle and James, I'll let you kick in here too if you want to. I know you're going to talk about technology, but if there's any last bits of coaching, if you could be the cheerleader for your peers who are not doing virtual small groups, is there anything that you would like to kind of say to them as a follow-up?
I think when this first happened, it was clear I didn't want to do was get in the arms race of content production. I think folks can do that way better. That wasn't my lane. That wasn't the lane I wanted to get in. And though there are folks that did and can do it well, there's usually just a couple winners in that lane, you know? And so, but what I thought, don't think the polished production is not necessarily what you're after. It's the intimacy, it's the genuineness, it's the, and you can pull that off by just really like logging on in one of these groups. Now, if you're gonna present, if you're gonna get in that game, that's another world, you know. And then you're gonna, you know, you want to spend the money, and but I've just found in that world, hey, you know, there's a lot better preachers than Will Choate, so go Google them. There's a lot better music than the folks we got. Go get to the iTunes, you know. But what we can have a live event, and we can check on each other, and that's the world I wanted to be in, and that's easy. You know, that doesn't take much money. You don't have to be too polished. You can't be a chill host. That's my only thing.
Right. And I will say, I agree with Will in the sense of content is not going to be the winner in this. Connection is going to be the winner in this. That's what you're seeking. But also recognize that the axis of the world tilted last March. And while everybody is fatigued about having to engage this way right now, once we have more options of face-to-face and being online, they're going to want the choice of whether they come in online or whether they come in person, for a lot of reasons, and see the value of learning this kind of technology well, so that people can maintain connection better. That is what you kind of need to keep in your heart is I tell people all the time, I'm not worried about our worship being super slick, because somebody can do better worship. Church of the Resurrection beats us every week, right? If people want a good worship, they can go there. What they need from us is a connection, a community, a sense that they matter, and it matters that to us that they're there. So that's what you need to focus on, and you need and see technology as a way to maintain that connection in all kinds of life situations.
Okay. One more question, and then I'll go ahead, James.
I was going to say, when we talk about hybridization in virtual small groups and ongoing looking towards the future of it, there is a real potential for us to engage and involve people in a deeper way than we have been for the last several years, because we look at the trend of average church attendance and participation in the life of the church. And we know that it was trending to folks were having much larger spans of time between their engaging moments in the life of the church, whether it was attending worship or it was attending a small group or those sorts of things. When we look at the hybridization models that we can live into, we have an opportunity to connect with people more readily where they are. I know in our small groups, we have had people chime in on Bible studies and in Sunday school when they're out of town, when they're on vacation, when they're far removed from the spaces where they would normally be able to engage with us. So there is a richer sense of community for those who are connecting in that way. And as we go forward back into having this dynamic of in-person ministries. I mean, right now we just don't, at least at First Church in Rogers. As we go forward, part of that conversation is we have folks who are not in the Rogers community who are participating in Bible studies and in ministries that they physically cannot be present. But we also have people who take vacations, and having a hybrid option means that we can meet people where they are in the spaces they are. As far as I see the questions about members who are technologically challenged. We have lots of more seasoned members in our congregation who it is just a matter of training and teaching them. I'll brag on our associate pastor Ron Hayes, who is one of the attendees right now. If you want to know somebody that has done some phenomenal work, because I moved to First Church in the middle of the summer, in the midst of this pandemic, and Ron did about the best thing you can with those 60 plus folks that are technologically challenged. He checked in on them. He saw and visited with them about, can I help you learn how to use this so that you can be connected? So that by the time that I started at First Church, a lot of that training had already taken place. And most of our older congregants, they can use Zoom pretty easily. And it's helpful that it can happen on our cell phones. It's not terribly complicated, or many of them are on Facebook. If you look at a lot of our churches, the statistics on Facebook on who's tuning in, if your church is like ours, it's women in the 65 and up range that are the largest group of viewers on our live worship. So visiting with them, offering to teach them, and that doesn't mean do it for them. It means walk with them through the process, and make sure that they understand how to do it. New talent of ministry in this age is being tech support.
Yeah. I literally did that yesterday. I had a woman come up, we hooked computer into a TV screen so that she could sit at the computer and I could stand safely enough away from her to walk her through how to set up a Zoom meeting. That's ministry now.
That is ministry. That is right. Well, I'm going to say a quick thank you to Will, because I know you've got to jump on another call. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experiences with us, and greatly appreciated.
Of course. All right. See y'all.
Bye. So I want to turn now to, and I also want to address kind of what Ken and Judy talked about too, because I know that Judy specifically, I think your church community is in more of a area that the broadband connectivity is a problem. And so, we can teach people how to use Facebook groups and Zoom and, all of the different platforms all day long. But if they can't connect to the internet, that is, it's not going to work. So Michelle and James, I know y'all are in broadband rich areas, but if you were not, what would your suggestion be? Where would your process go of how do I create small groups with people who do not have access to the internet during a pandemic? And go.
That's mean.
It's you know what? It is our reality for so many. It is the reality.
I mean, phone trees, text message circles, letter circles. Get people committed to writing letters back and forth. I don't know anybody that doesn't get excited when they get mail, in particular personal mail from someone. That's always a joy-filled space. But there is, Facebook is such a readily accessible tool on folks' phones, and so many people do have that level of connectivity via online. When we talk about virtual small groups, that's just if folks are unable to connect online, then it gets to be tricky. Ron Hayes brought up an FM transmitter, which is not expensive. We've been using one for what we're doing is drive-in communion. So we have folks drive into a parking lot that faces our church steps, and Ron and I will lead a service of communion, and then we just simply go out into the parking lot and take the time to visit and check in with people and pray with people. What we found is that people will check in with those around them. They'll stay in their cars because they know that's the expectation, but they'll roll down their windows and visit with one another. So sometimes it's just creating the opportunities in the midst of that distance, to have people have space to connect.
And I would also say, think in longer terms of how that connection takes place. So we do broadcast our worship services, and we have a very active, welcoming presence on Sunday morning. But we also recognize that people join us all throughout the week. Same thing with the Revelation Bible study, right? So I regularly check notifications and go back in and engage. And so see engagement, see connection as taking place over the course of many days and not necessarily just one. So if someone is having trouble with their signal, at the usual time, don't give up on them. They may be able to get in later. They may drive up to the library, and catch up with church. There's one woman that always, like on a Wednesday, all of a sudden there's bam, 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 like a ton of reactions to our stuff on the church. And I'm like, okay, this is our church day, right? So think in those kind of broader terms as well, that accessibility can happen in a lot of spaces.
And also, and we need to discuss some technological platforms, but we've covered ways to for outreach and for audience connection, but in bringing it to small group connection is I'm always going to recommend the telephone. You can do small groups on your telephone, and I have an iPhone, and it's a relatively newer model, but you can do conference calls on your iPhone. You call one person, then you add another one, and you merge the calls. I mean, it's all, and y'all, I was the one that mentioned the flux capacitor. If I can do this, anybody can do this. But, to set a time of prayer, just a 15-minute prayer for a conference call, and which is going to, I would keep your group small, but to have everybody on the same call and to be able to pray together, and you have to use your facilitator hat, wear your hat very well to keep everything very limited and focused, and but that is a wonderful mode of communication still, so, and very easy to do. So yes. All right, Jacob, I want to bring you on. I want for you, we're gonna kind of shift gears and talk about, we've mentioned Zoom, we've mentioned Facebook groups a little bit. What are some different platforms? Okay, let me back up. Say you have a church that is mostly 60 and above, as some people had mentioned. That is going to take a specific kind of tool to connect with them. It may not be the same tool. It doesn't need to be the same tool that connects with your youth. Also, if you have a lot of young families in your active families, the kids are school and piano lessons and soccer and, all of that stuff, that's a group that may not connect technologically the same way that the 60 plus crowd is going to connect. So knowing what your audience needs and knowing the best way to connect with them is something that you need to consider, that one size does not fit all. So, Judy, for your church specifically, you might be able to offer a Zoom group or a Facebook group or, whatever for the people that do understand or that want to learn and do have good connectivity. But for those that don't, you offer a phone group. So, having different types of platforms is crucial. So I'm going to let Jacob, our tech guru, share with you some of the most popular and most interesting ways to connect through a small group today in 2021.
All right. So I'm going to begin with the very lowest tech options and work our way up. And again, touching on tools that people have already mentioned. Again, I think letter writing is good. As a 23-year-old, I would love to receive more letters than I do. Just throwing that out there. But to also address some of the other ideas, FM transmission is great. The one thing I want to note about FM transmission, and I say this because I was a radio engineer in college and also served as a station manager for a radio station, is be very particular with the FM transmitters that you use. You want to make sure you get a very high quality one that is also approved by the Federal Communications Commission, that is licensed specifically for US usage, because radios do vary from place to place in the world. And you can buy one that may be tuned for different radio frequencies in other countries than they are for here. And of course, you have to operate them within the range of allowance for unlicensed radio stations. I give that caveat because I worked in that field for a little bit in college. I also want to note that as mentioned earlier, I believe with Judy, being in a area that has issues with broadband connectivity, one that I'm very familiar with, having grown up in the Southeast District, where internet connectivity can be very poor even in larger cities. I grew up in Sheridan. I grew up having very, very limited internet access, and I lived inside the city limits of Sheridan, Arkansas. One option in areas with good cell phone connectivity is to consider using an app like GroupMe, which, while it is an app in and of itself, it does feature SMS capabilities. So you have a way in which you can create a text group of more than 10 people, because texting groups with phones are limited to 10 individuals. You can create texting groups that have larger capacity. As Amy mentioned, you can also use Zoom in such a way that specifically focuses on creating phone-based conversations. So you can set up a Zoom call and share the contact information with people in advance, so that people just call into the meeting and it's strictly focused on that. I will also note that that because Zoom does cost money, as I'm sure many of y'all are aware, you do have the option, although I don't consider it as user friendly, but it is available to you through your ARUMC conference email account, is Google Meet, which is essentially Google's take on Zoom. Again, it's free, but it's not as user friendly, but it also does provide that call-in feature. So I would certainly suggest that at the very least looking into it. One of the, of course, we've also talked about Facebook groups, and while I do think it's one of the near ubiquitous tools in existence, I mean, it seems like everybody's got a Facebook account, and everybody who doesn't even exist has a Facebook account, because fake accounts are the thing. It's the potential downside to it is that with people shifting away from Facebook and tending towards the younger demographics, you do have the possibility of unintentionally excluding people who don't use Facebook. And also you are limited to text-based conversations through Facebook groups. So there is that. Finally, I want to mention two tools. Let's see, definitely want to mention that. I'm going to start with the first one, and then if I remember what the second one is off the top of my head, I'll go back to it. The first tool I want to mention that is being used among the younger audiences, and even here in the Arkansas Conference, is a communication tool called Discord. Discord was initially designed as a chat platform for people who play video games, and has expanded to a what I would call a Slack alternative, insofar as that it is tool that centers around channels that can either be text or voice-based. This is, again, a tool that's very popular with the young crowd. I will note that publicly available communities in Discord number in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of members. So this is a tool with a large user base. But on the flip side, it is one that you have to register and have the app. So it's a tool that would require yet another account, and so is better suited for audiences that are more familiar with that. But the plus side of it is that it's a very intuitive tool, and it is one where it takes, in my opinion, it takes the best features of a program like Slack and just runs with those rather than adding on additional features on top. And it's very easy to say you're having a text-based conversation and everyone happens to be available for a call, so you can shift into a voice channel very fluidly and not, go into Zoom, set up a meeting, and then get everybody to connect into the meeting. So it's very helpful in that regard. I promise I had one other tool I felt like off the top of my head, and I've already forgotten. But
that's okay. Go ahead.
We can come back to it.
Okay.
But the point I really want to make in rapid firing off all of these tools is that when you're talking with either an existing small group or a small group you want to set up, and you're thinking about the audience that you're going to have, the one point I wanted to have take away is recognize which tool is best for your group. Whether it be in audience or in content. As Michelle mentioned, the Revelation study that they're doing, they're using 2 tools in order to best accommodate both the audience and the content. And that may be necessary for your group as well. But also it could be one of those things where you're wanting to start a small group that is more focused on a particular audience or is very much focused on a specific set of content, but not necessarily focused on a particular audience. And so thinking about what tools you want to use, and how you want to communicate information, and what information you're wanting to communicate goes a long way, rather than just saying, everyone use this tool. It's the magic tool. There is no magic tool. The tools that are going to work best for your situation are going to end up making the group.
Correct. Okay, so I want to shift to James really quickly, because then I want to answer a couple of questions, because I want James to share a little bit about a platform called Discord or Discord. I don't know where
it's Discord.
It's Discord.
It's just Discord.
Discord. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I mean, I think Jacob is spot on when we talk about reflecting on the tools that we're using and the audiences that we're going to connect with them is really, really important. As somebody that is smack dab in the millennial generation, like I fall right in the dead center of millennials. Facebook is something that I touch for work. And Facebook groups for me carry with them the real reality that any posts in a group that I'm a part of tend to get buried in the algorithm and the stuff that I just don't pay attention to in general. That's not that I have a problem with everything everybody puts on Facebook. It's just not my preferred platform to spend time on. Discord itself definitely skews younger in its usage, and it has a substantial community that revolve around gaming, but there's a lot of communities beyond that. And I think I can actually share my screen. I do have it up right now.
Awesome.
I have a vague one up right now. I don't have I don't have a lot of the servers that I tend to be a part of right now, but I'll at least be able to show you what this looks like. The potential that Discord offers and it highlights is that there is space for ongoing connection and conversation, because when we talk about community that we're wanting to form in this hybrid reality of online and in-person ministries, and that keeps a conversation that flows in both spaces, Discord for me as a millennial, as somebody who uses it for gaming and some other spaces, some Patreons that I support. If you don't know what Patreon is, Google it. It's a platform for supporting artists and podcasters and different stuff.
Bless you, James, for mentioning Patreon. Bless you.
So again, all these different tools, but you can set up different text channels. You can set up voice channels for different things. This is a test server that I'm playing around with as a potential space to workshop ideas with fellow clergy people and lay people. We've got some lay people on this server right now anyway. But it really is the thing I would encourage about it. It offers ongoing conversation, but really the gist of all of it is reflecting on not only why we are living into this hybrid space, which I think is the value of being able to connect with people better and in a more far-reaching manner, but also how the tools that we use impact who it is that we're going to connect with. That it really makes a difference what tools we're using as to how we are going to be living into it. And you can see Reverend Dr. Michelle Morris is posting in it right now. There are different channels. I mean, if you want a good laugh, here's a meme for you. But the point is this: be creative in the platforms you use. And this isn't to say that you have to learn how to use Discord yourself. If you have somebody in your church that is fluent in it, or a handful of folks that are already use it for different purposes, that's an opportunity to equip lay people, to help new groups find ways to connect and to live into being a part of a community of faith with one another. It's not something that you necessarily have to learn yourself. You need to be aware of it at the very least.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to touch really quickly and bring reference to a couple of things. Clark Atkins has shared with us on the Q&A, freeconferencecall.com. He says it really is free, or for $5 a month, you can get a dedicated phone number, a specific phone number that you give, and that's the one that you use. And that's not a bad expense for $5 if you are going to use a telephone ministry. So take that into consideration. That's great for those folks that are broadband poor, in broadband poor areas, I should say. Let me talk a little bit. Ken Pearson has given some great things. He's talked about GroupMe, and he touched a little bit on about the importance of a YouTube channel, and all of those are great. And I just want to let people know that there is no one right choice. There is no one right choice, and it is always changing. It is always adapting. I promise you, next week there will be another communication platform. And this is all, it may be very daunting to you as church leaders, but be encouraged by this. Be very encouraged, because you know what that means? It means that people want to connect. People are needing connection, and they are needing personal connection. And we all as human beings want face-to-face connection, but in a time when that is not always a safe thing, virtual connection with a group of people that you can grow with is what we all want. And so, and there are new opportunities popping up every day. So I would encourage you to pray hard about it and talk to your, if you have any kind of ministry team, get their ideas, get their suggestions, ask what are people wanting? You know, what would you like to know more about, or what would you like to meet and do? Do you would just prayer, would just gathering in prayer for 15 minutes a week be, you know, bring joy to your life and make you feel more connected? You know, it doesn't have to be slick, like Michelle said. So we have just about met our time, but I want to go around and see if there's any closing words that anyone wants to give, any kind of encouragement for our leaders to, let's see, Jeff Work just asked, are there programs that can help streamline or centralize posting engagement cross platforms? Can anybody answer that?
So like in a social media capacity? Because I will note that I'll touch on it briefly, but there are a number of social media webinars that we cover some tools like this, but one suggestion is looking at Facebook's Creator Studio, which allows for cross-posting between Facebook and Instagram if you use those tools in particular. There are also third-party tools such as Hootsuite and Sprout Social that allow you to coordinate posts across multiple third-party platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or whatever other platforms you happen to use.
Yeah, and let me just say that many of these are not cheap.
Mm-hmm. Facebook Creator Studio is free. It is a part of Facebook itself. Other tools, their free platform is like, you know, maximum 3 accounts, I believe, for Hootsuite, for example. And those, you know, the cost increases exponentially as you go on.
I know that Sprout is amazing. But you know, also it's not the cheapest, but anyway, anybody else want to add anything?
Just remember, you're reaching people. I mean, where they are, and let that be your inspiration. That there are a lot of folks. I'll just briefly share. I was contacted by a guy who saw one of our worship services on YouTube this week and sent me.
I'm so glad you're sharing this story.
Sent me just a lovely reflection on Genesis 1, and I wrote him back and I said, I don't know if you're in Conway or not. If you're in Conway, whenever it's safe to meet face to face, I'd love to have more conversation with you about this. And if not, I would love to set up a Zoom with you. And he wrote me back and said, I'm actually not in Conway, I'm in Oregon, but I also have severe autism and cannot be face to face. And he said, in fact, I can't even really engage in conversation over email. It is too difficult and too stressful for me. And so I said, well, thank you for sharing your reflection, and you're welcome to share reflection with me anytime. And I will respond and say that I have received that gift and am grateful for it. But we are able to reach people now in ways that we couldn't before. And it's making a difference in their lives. And it's taking the gospel to them into their lives. So just let that energize you.
Thank you. Green Forest, I'm thinking that is Michael Bolin. Hey, Michael. Yes, sermon by phone. He received a grant for that. I'm wondering if you got that from the United Methodist Church, or anyway, you might want to share that in a Facebook group or whatever. But anyway, sermon by phone is another way to connect with people by telephone. Yeah, I want to, in closing, I want to direct you to your chat. I have added a link it is a piece that was written by Scott Hughes, who is with Discipleship Ministries, a United Methodist, part of a United Methodist general agency. And it is making the most of online small groups. And it's a great little article. So I would suggest that you go ahead and click on it and have that tab open, or at least take a picture of it. But anyway, it's a great little article that I wanted to leave with you as well. They offer many resources as well. Thank you to everybody for joining us in this fun conversation today. It does my heart good to be able to talk about possibility for growth and connection. So thank you, everybody.
I want to mention one last thing.
Yep.
If you have, just strictly from a tools perspective, if you have questions about any of the tools mentioned or tools that you've researched and you want to know more about, don't hesitate to reach out to myself. I'm always happy to either do some additional research, work with you to implement the tool, things like that. It's part of what I'm here for. And that goes for, again, anything mentioned today or anything that you've researched and want to talk about further. Also, I've remembered the last platform I was going to talk about. If your church already has an internal church management program that y'all use heavily, like Realm or Breeze or any program like that, that's got a small group functionality, also consider using it. The advantage is you don't have to have people create accounts because they should already have an account if they're part of your church. But the disadvantage is that it's more limited to people that are already part of your church and not necessarily visitors. I wanted to throw that out there because I do know some churches that use their internal platforms instead of others that have been mentioned. That's my 2 cents. Now I'm done.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, James. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to Will Choate, who was able to join us earlier. And everyone have a very blessed day. As always, if you ever have any questions, need any kind of support, someone to find out something for you, please feel free to always reach out to the Center for Communication with the Arkansas Conference. And the email is CFC. for Center for Communication at arumc.org. Thanks, everybody. Be blessed and have a great day.